Yes, let's get into it. I am so excited. So first thing, we're gonna just look at how this is made. So there is one large piece for the coat body, and then you can see there where the sleeve was attached. And then we also have the hood piece. So we're going to be making a quilt slab for each individual piece, and we need to figure out how large to make those. So we're going to need 4 pieces. We're going to need a coat body, 2 sleeve pieces, and a hood piece. And we are going to make these much larger than they need to be. This is a lesson I learned the first time around. Okay, so for measurements, an easy thing to do is lay out a coat you already have and take measurements. You can also measure on your body. If you're gonna do that, we need a hip measurement. We need a length measurement, which I like to just throw the measuring tape over my shoulder and kind of hold it, yeah, like that. And then a sleeve measurement, kind of just going at the middle of my bicep in between my fingers. Again, these are gonna be much bigger than we need. That is on purpose. Okay, now to figure out how big to make everything. I am basically just adding 5 inches to all of these measurements, so I have plenty of wiggle room. I added 6 to the length because the one I have now ended up a lot shorter than I wanted, so I just want to be on the safe side. So I took all those measurements, I added 6 to the length and the width, and then I'm going to add 5 to all of my other measurements. And this is going to tell me how big to make each one of those quilt slabs. And don't forget, we're going to need 2 sleeve pieces. So now that we know how big to make our quilt slabs, next video, we're gonna figure out how much fabric we need. Let's get into some quilt math. I'm going to be using a charm pack for this. A charm pack is pre-cut squares, so they are 5 inches and there's 42 in the pack. So I'm doing some math here to figure out how many additional squares I'm going to need. Now, even though these squares are 5 inches, I'm using a measurement of 4.5 because we have to account for seam allowances and we are going for finished measurements here. So I've just taken each side, divided it by 4.5 and then rounding up. So that is telling me how many squares I need per little slab that we're making. So I need a total of 188 5-inch squares. I have 42 in this charm pack, so that means I need an additional 146. So let's translate that into yardage. Now I know I can get 8 squares per 5-inch strip of fabric because fabric runs 42 inches wide. This means I need 19 strips of fabric. We're gonna round that up to 20 and I'm gonna cut 5 strips of 4 different fabrics because 5 times 4 is 20. That's math I don't need a calculator for. So 5 strips times 5 inches is 25 inches. We're gonna round up to 3/4 of a yard. So I need 3/4 of a yard of 4 different fabrics. And I'm gonna cut all of that into 5-inch squares. Then we also need backing. So here I am adding up the lengths. So I need 61. The 2 sleeve pieces can fit on the same length of fabric because 21 plus 21 is 42. And then I'll need an additional 22 for the hood. So I need a total of 3.25 yards of backing fabric. So I basically just added up all those lengths and divided by 36. That got me the 3.25 yards. And then you'll need batting to go in between. And then binding, a 1/2 yard ought to do ya. I didn't do the math on it, but a 1/2 yard should be enough. So, okay, now we know how much fabric we need. Tomorrow we will get to cutting. And this is part 3 of making a quilt coat. In our last video, we figured out that we needed 188 5-inch squares, so we're gonna be cutting those. I like to starch my fabric before I press it. I layered 2 of my fabrics on top of each other, folded in half, and then here I am using my ruler to measure 5-inch strips and then cutting 5-inch strips going the other way. This is pretty quick. I cut all of these in maybe 15 minutes. So I did this with my other 2 fabrics as well, but that video was mostly the back of my head. So this is the one you're getting. There's all of our fabric, and in our next video, we'll go over how to lay this out and turn it into our quilt slabs. Hey TikTok, my name's Tani, and this is part 4 of making a quilt coat. Today we are laying out our pieces to get them ready to sew. So this is just showing you where the quilt coat is gonna be. Basically, that line down the middle will be the center front of the coat. And then the pieces kind of on the side and at the corners will likely get cut off when we go to fit it. So just keep that in mind as you're laying out your fabric. So I needed 14 by 7, took up my whole entire table, Once I had everything laid out, I looked at it under a black and white filter just to make sure the values were all distributed evenly. And then I went back and moved some things around just to make sure there were no fabrics touching each other and everything was spaced nice and evenly. Once I had that done, I am stacking up the columns for web piecing. So I'm picking up the first piece in the column, putting it on top of the one next to it, and then just working my way down and then labeling it when I get to the bottom. This will make more sense in our next video, don't worry. Okay, next up is our sleeves. So I laid out both of those at the same time. Same thing here, the pieces around the edges are probably going to get cut off or absorbed into a seam allowance, so make sure your favorite fabrics are in the middle. Here was our first pass with the black and white filter. Move some things around, and here's the second one. And I'll be honest, I hit a point where I just said it's good enough. All right, labeling those sleeve pieces and then laying out our hood piece. This one was also 5x6 or 30 pieces. Stack them, label them, boom, ready to go. All right, we'll start sewing in our next video. Hello, welcome to part 5 of making a quilt coat. So we have our pieces from the quilt body laid out here, taking column 1 and column 2, taking the first piece from each one, putting them together and stitching them at a 1/4 inch seam. And then we're gonna take piece 2 and piece 2, stitch those together, piece 3 and piece 3, all the way down. Then we're gonna go back to the top and add the top piece from column 3 to the top piece from column 2, and just continue chain piecing each of these on. You're just going to continue doing this with every column until you have all of your rows pieced, like this. And now we need to press. So we're gonna press each row in an opposite direction, and this is gonna allow us to nest the seams really nicely. So one goes right, one goes left, one goes right. Do that all the way down, and then we will go stitch our rows together. So I like to use a pin here, nest those seams, and I put my pin at a little bit of an angle just to hold that back seam allowance down so it doesn't accidentally get flipped when it's going through the machine. Okay, so we're just gonna sew all of our rows together, snip the little loop from our chain piecing, and I like to press these seams open. Oops, tell me what you do about those. That's what I do. Oh, hey, look, it's done. So this is the piece for my coat body. Let's check out our points. Pretty good, pretty good. We're gonna do the same thing for the sleeve pieces and the hood pieces, and then come back for part 6. Hey everybody, let's make some basting spray. All right, we're gonna need water, vodka, salt, and flour. That's it. We are gonna get a pot going. We're gonna put 2 cups of water in there with a teaspoon of salt. And then we're gonna put 1 cup of water in a watertight container with 3 heaping tablespoons of flour. Put the lid on, shake it up. We're going to need a cup of vodka, cheapest vodka money can buy. Don't drink it, it's really bad vodka. All right, water's boiling, so we're gonna add in that flour and water mixture. We need about 6 to 8 minutes. Stir the whole time, make sure it's cooking like this, and check it periodically. We're looking for it to start to thicken, so it's still too loose here. And then getting there, but not quite there. There we go. That's what we want. Nice and thick like that. Okay, so now we're gonna pour it off into a bowl to cool down. And we're gonna set that aside with our cup of vodka, and we'll come back to that in a couple hours. All right, so our mixture has cooled down. We are going to add in the cup of vodka and give it a nice mix. Once that's all mixed together, pour it into your spray bottle. You want a spray bottle that has a really nice fine mist. And that's our basting spray. This makes a bottle and some extra. I usually get like, I don't know, 5 or 6 quilts out of this. In my next video, I will show you how to use it. So stay tuned. All right, let's baste this bitch. We're going to start by laying our backing fabric on the floor face down and then taping it down. And I like to stick the tape to the fabric first and then pull it a little bit. This will just help you get it really nice and tight. So we're gonna finish by putting tape on the corners. Next, our batting goes down, and then our quilt top goes down. Here's our handy basting spray. Check a couple videos back for the recipe on how to make this. And the key to this basting spray is having a bottle that mists really well. So we're doing a nice even layer of the basting spray, putting that back, smoothing it out. You always wanna try to smooth from the center out. And then as far as the spray goes, you want enough to make it damp, but not wet. So spreading from the middle out again. And then next we're gonna peel back that top layer, spray, smooth. You get the idea here. And here's that last side. And again, when you're smoothing, just make sure you keep everything going in the same direction to keep your lines nice and straight. Okay, time to make the magic happen. Grab your iron, set it down for about 4 seconds, pick it up, set it down. Pick it up, set it down. You're going to do that over the entire quilt top, alternating the direction of the iron to make sure you hit all of the spots. Once you've done that, peel your tape up, flip it over, and do the same thing on the back. You might get a few little wrinkles like this. Don't worry, they're not going to pucker when you quilt, I promise. If you get any on the floor, just wipe it up with a cloth and hit any wet spots with the iron, and then boom, we're done. This quilt is basted and ready for quilting. All right, let's talk about quilting. We are going to do these gentle curves. It is my go-to quilting method. First thing we need to do is switch out our tray for our extension table. I like to bump my stitch length up just a little bit to 3 and put a fresh needle in. Clean your machine, put a fresh needle in. Okay, so for this wavy line quilting, the key here really is having like a wide grip on how you're holding your quilt. And then we're kind of just pushing one side through and then the other. I love this method because it is super loose and you really can't mess it up. But here you see from this angle, we're going to the right a little bit, and then we're going to the left a little bit. And oops, don't quilt over your backing. That's a bad idea. Okay, so we're going right, we're going left, we're going right, we're going left. This clip is a little long. There we go. Okay, here's an overhead view. You can see a little bit better view of what my arms are doing here. Sorry, it's a little shaky. But this goes super fast. I love a time lapse like this. It looks like it's just floating through. I wish it went this fast. But yeah, back and forth, right to left, right to left. This is going to go super quick. Make sure you're starting from the same side of your quilt every time. And there we go. Some beautiful, gentle curve quilting. Love it. Okay, but what about if you want to do straight line quilting? Let's talk about that too. First up, grab a Hera marker. This is a must-have tool. What it's going to do is with your ruler, it's going to leave just a nice little crease in your fabric for you to follow. And it's great because it's not putting any sort of marking on your fabric. Okay, so stitch in the ditch. I'm not looking at the needle. I'm looking at the seam line and I'm watching that seam line go right down the center of my foot. So here's a little quicker version of it. And, you know, don't worry about it being perfect because we're going to put this thing through the wash. It's going to crinkle and it's going to look amazing. So one thing I do like to do with straight line quilting is I kind of do bigger sections and then I go back in and mark the smaller sections. So I'm like marking and then quilting and then marking and then quilting. I don't know. I like that better. So yeah, there's my straight line quilting. It's looking pretty good. I'm digging it. I like it. I like it. And yeah, hope you enjoyed this. This was the quilting portion. So you're going to quilt all the different slabs of your quilt coat. And then the next video is where we really get into it, where we're going to start actually assembling our coat. So exciting. All right, let's make this quilt coat. So this one here does not have a hood. You can see it is just cut up the center and down the back a little bit. And then we have a side seam and a curve for the arm. This one does have a hood, so it's going to have more of an oval shape cut out at the top. We'll go over that when we do the hood. First thing you need to do is figure out which side you want to be the front of your coat. Fold your slab in half long ways and then lay the front side of your coat up. We need to figure out how wide the bottom of the coat will be, so take your hip measurement and then add 4 to 5 inches of ease and an inch for seam allowance. I'm going with 4 inches of ease, gives me 45 inches total. I'm dividing that by 2 because the coat's folded in half. That gives me 22.5 is how wide the bottom is when it's laying flat. I am marking the center of the coat there and then measuring over 11.25 inches because that's half of 22.5, and then doing the same thing on the other side to mark the side seam. Next up, we got to do the sleeve. So take your bicep measurement plus 5 to 6 inches of ease. I went with 5 inches. That gives me 16 inches. Divided by 2 again is 8. So I am going to come down 8 inches from the top fold and mark a line, and that should intersect with the side seam I just made, and then take a curved object like a plate, line that up with the side seam line, the sleeve line, and mark your curve. Next up, we're just going to pin through both layers all along that line we just marked. So here we are pinning everything. We're going to do a basting stitch, so go ahead and turn your stitch length up the highest it will go. and just run a stitch line right along that line that you just marked. After we have sewn both of those lines on both sides, this is the scary part. We've got to cut. So we are going to cut right down that center line that we marked. I like to use scissors here, just have a little bit more control. And then when you get to the top, you're gonna cut into the back about 2 inches. We may go more later. We just need enough to try it on. So here we are, trying it on. Let's check the fit. This is good for me. I have enough overlap here to close it. I'm happy with how wide the sleeve openings are, so I'm ready to move forward. If you're unhappy with the fit, take out your basting stitches and make adjustments as needed. So I'm using a 3/8 seam allowance. So I'm putting the 3/8 line right on that stitch line and then cutting away the fabric. So doing that at the top and then getting in there with my ruler and my hair marker again, just to mark that curve, and then getting in there and cutting that with my scissors because I realized that the rotary cutter didn't work that well for that. Okay, so now those pieces are cut out and we can go ahead and remove our basting stitches with our BFF, the seam ripper. So go ahead, take out all of your basting stitches, and then we are going to flip the coat around so that it is right sides together and pin that in place. Lots of pins. I had to go for the bigger pin cushion. Needed more pins. More pins. Okay, so we're pinning, and oh, don't forget to turn your stitch length back down. So stitch all of that at your 3/8 seam allowance. Hey, look, we're getting somewhere. We'll do the hood next time. All right, it's time to add the hood. Let's do this. So how I did this was I took a hood on a jacket that I already liked. I kind of looked at how it was made and I just copied it. So saw where the neckline opening was, copied that over to my jacket, made sure it was centered, and then just kind of drew in a curve there and clipped out the neckline with my scissors. Start small here. You can always go back and cut more. We're going to trace this, but oh, we need bigger paper. There we go. Okay, so take the side of that, and I basically am just holding it flat and tracing the general shape of it onto my paper. And then I'm gonna go back and add my seam allowance. I would recommend adding a bigger seam allowance than I did. I did a 1/4 inch. I would recommend doing closer to 3/8 or a 1/2 inch, just to account for the bulk of the quilted fabric. All right, measuring this here just to see how big that kind of center rectangle is in the hood piece. And now we're cutting. Oh my God, we're cutting into it. Okay, so don't forget to flip your pattern piece over because we need these to be mirrored images of each other. Also, don't cut like I was cutting. This is bad. Oh God. Anyways, okay, we're cutting the long rectangle that's going down the center. And we're gonna cut one end off. Stop, don't do what I'm about to do. Don't cut the end off, just wait. Just trust me on that. Okay. Whoops. All right. So we're sewing that center rectangle onto each side of the hood. Just kind of ease it around the curve as you go and do that on either side. And then you'll see where I messed up. Yep. Yeah, don't ask me how it happened. It happened. Okay. But boom, we fixed it. Kind of. Moving on. Find the center back of your hood piece and line that up to the center back of your jacket. And pause again. We need to finish these seams before we move on. So I'm making binding the same way that you would make quilt binding, and pressing that and stitching it onto the seams. So I'm attaching this the exact same way that I attach binding to my quilts. I'm stitching it on at a 1/4 inch all the way down. It's kind of weird. Just, take your time. Go slow. You'll get it. And then we're going to use a little bit of Elmer's glue here to press that over to the other side of the fabric. And then we will come back and stitch in the ditch to stitch that down. And there we go. We've got some beautifully finished seams on the inside of our hood. Okay, so, oh yeah, look at that. Beautiful. Okay, let's find the center back again, match that up to the center back. And just kidding. We've got one more thing that we need to finish. Go ahead, throw some binding on that front opening of your hood. Sometimes you figure things out in the moment. Okay, this time I promise we are actually attaching the hood to the jacket. So match up those center pieces, pin it all the way around, and it is not going to line up at the edges. That's okay. That's kind of what we're going for here. So we are stitching that on with I don't know what seam allowance we're using anymore. Whatever seam allowance you want, whatever one makes you feel good. Yeah, and there we go. Look, the hood is on our jacket. Woohoo! Okay, sleeves are up next. Stay tuned. All right, let's get some sleeves added to our coat. First thing we need to do is measure the arm opening. So I've got 8 1/4 there, and then I measured the bottom part of a sleeve on a jacket I had at 4 1/2. I doubled those numbers, and then I made a mistake. Oh no, I forgot to add seam allowance. Add seam allowance here. Yeah, so anyways, it's all fine later. It ended up fine at the 16 1/2, but I wish I would have cut it at 9 1/2 because it was a little tight on my wrists. But then we're gonna measure from where the bottom of your current sleeve is to your wrist. I couldn't video that. Mine was 15 1/2. And then I remembered to add seam allowance here. So, you know, sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. Okay, so marking the center line of where my sleeve will be, and then measuring out 4 1/2, 4 1/2, and then doing the same thing up at the top here. So marking out that 15 1/2 length, and then measuring the 16 1/2 inches across, and then basically just marking a line from that top corner down to the bottom corner. So it's making that weird kind of trapezoid shape. I think that's trapezoid, right? Anyways, we've got that marked. Now we cut. And then I just used that same sleeve piece and stacked it on top of my other slab and cut out my other sleeve. Bing, bang, boom. Okay, we've got our sleeves. So we're gonna put them right sides together on the long edge and stitch that together. Hold on, let's finish some seams first. Let's go ahead and, oh, I guess I'm gonna show you the seam that I eventually take out. Here we go, back to our binding. Go ahead and just pop some binding right on the sleeve opening. There we go. Okay, now let's go back and sew those long edges together. Okay, so we are sewing the two long edges right side together, flip the sleeve right side out, and then put it into the coat body. And oh wait, guess what? One more seam that we need to finish first. So for the long inside seam, I'm just folding over that top edge of the binding and then going ahead and stitching it down. Did the same thing for the side seam where the little arm curve is too. So finish those two seams with your binding, and then we can match them up. Okay, so we are pinning the sleeves to the coat body, right sides together, and then I had a stroke of genius. Tell me what you think about this. Instead of going back later and attaching my binding, I'm just gonna sew it on right now while I'm sewing the arm to the coat body. Smart, right? There's probably a reason this is a bad idea, but I don't know what it is. So anyways, I started about 1 inch down from the edge of the binding, and then I'm sewing it on all around that arm opening. And then when you get to the end, you just cut the tail off, and then you tuck it in where we folded that edge under. And the video cut off here. I don't know what happened. But anyways, I finished stitching that on, and then I brought my glue back out, and we're pressing that over. We're pressing with the iron. This is looking good. Okay, and then we gotta go back to the sewing machine and stitch in the ditch to finish that off. And then wait for it, keep waiting. There it is, ha, sleeves are done. Do I wish that I had matched up the pattern on the sleeve to the pattern on the coat? I mean, yeah, I don't. At this point, I do not care. Looks great. Okay, moving on. We're gonna do finishing touches in the next video. First things first though, this is a little long, so let's go ahead and just whoop, there we go. Okay, we're gonna do pockets in the next one and finish this up. Hey everybody, it's here. The final part of our quilt coat journey. The coat is done. Here's the last video. If you have hung in there with me for this whole thing, thank you. I really appreciate you. And if you make a coat, please tag me so I can see it. Okay, I hope you enjoy. Okay, so we are on finishing touches. We're gonna add some pockets, and we are gonna put some binding and a zipper on. I'm using some of my scrap material to make pockets, just tracing my hand here, kind of creating a general shape. Found something round to get that curve nice and a straight line, and then folded it in half so when I cut it, it would be perfectly symmetrical. So once you get your little template made, you can go ahead and cut out your fabric pieces for your pockets. And then once you have both of those, you are just going to attach quilt binding like we've been doing this whole step. So look how nice that looks. Doesn't it look nice? Okay, and on they go to the coat. So I just kind of position them and then stitch them down in the ditch on the binding. And then we have pockets. So next thing, we need to put binding all the way around the edges. So boom, look at that. I wish it was that quick and easy. So we've got binding on, and oh yeah, one quick little tip: when you get to the part where you're doing the hood, just flip that over so your raw edges are aligned and stitch your binding on. Okay, back to zipper time. Zipper time, zipper time. Putting the zipper in, I want it to kind of sit under the binding, and I want to make sure that the two pieces on the front of my coat line up. So we're gonna use a basting stitch here, and I am just stitching really close to the edge with that really long stitch length. And this is just gonna hold the coat in place so that those two pieces are aligned. And then I've just got my zipper in here, and I'm just using my fingers to kind of place it right under the middle and pinning it in place all the way down the coat. This is a little finicky. It's weird, but you can do it. It's not too bad, I promise. Okay, so finish getting your zipper all pinned in place, and then we're gonna get ready to stitch it down. So we're just gonna stitch in the ditch from where our binding is attached. So you're not even really gonna see a stitch line here. So, okay, first attempt, I went in, I tried to just move my needle over, and then I was like, nope, I'm just gonna go get the zipper foot. So I got up and got the zipper foot. Okay, so back stitch a little bit, and here we go. Just stitching in the ditch, right down that line. And then again, kind of feeling with my hands just to make sure that that zipper stays right under the middle piece of the coat. And then one tip here, I went down and then went back the other direction. Also, don't look at my back stitching, it's really bad. Anyways, go the same direction. Start at the top and go to the bottom, and then start at the top and go to the bottom. You'll see why in a minute. Anyways, we are seam ripping open that basting stitch, and boom, we've got a zipper in. And yep, yeah, that's why you don't wanna go opposite directions, because after all that work, they still ended up not perfectly aligned, but that's okay. Okay, let's finish off the top of that zipper. So I'm just clipping off the excess and then trimming off that little piece of the teeth and then folding that little tab under. And I first tried to do like a little bar tack and stitch this down, but I didn't like the way that looked. So I took it out and decided, you know what, this is a hand stitching. I haven't done any hand stitching on this project yet. I can handle a little bit of hand stitching. So doing just like a basic little whip stitch here, just to hold that little tab folded under, and then making sure I'm only grabbing the inside piece of the binding so that my stitches don't show on the front. And then once you've done that on both sides, that's how it looks. It looks really nice and clean from the front. I'm really happy with it. And holy shit, we made a quilt coat. We did it. It's done. I'm in shock. I can't believe it happened. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Do I love it? Absolutely. It is so freaking cute. I'll post more pictures of it washed because it got crinkly and amazing. And oh my God, we did it. Thank you.